Now, while on the surface, the Smashing Machine looks like the role that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was always meant to play, a man whose charisma is only matched by the size of his pecs. The charming people's champion is here unlike we've ever seen him before, going full out in the ring with no ego, no fanfare, just a visceral physical undertaking to transform himself inside and out into the real-life MMA pioneer Mark Kerr. But can the pressure of a prestige film from the first-time solo feature director Benny Safdie turn this rock into diamonds? Hi, my name is Emily or La Movie Mija. I'm a part-time filmmaker, full-time movie lover, and this is my review of The Smashing Machine. Again, even though on paper this role looks like it was custom made for Johnson, I think this is easily one of the most challenging roles he's had to date, and it's a very important time in his life that he's taking it on. In interviews, the actor has been very forthcoming about his own shortcomings as an actor, claiming that he's been feeling the urge to do something worthwhile, but being too afraid to actually take on the challenge. It's no secret that some of that infectious charm has been sullied between the Black Adam debacle, in which the narrative there seems to be that Johnson tried to rearrange the entirety of the DCEU to center around his character Black Adam, to the poor reputation that he built for himself on the set of the box office flop Red 1. There, he denies that he had any bad behavior on set, but he takes full responsibility for being late to set and for leaving bottles of urine around for production to find. I've been on a handful of sets myself, and I know that finding the restroom is sometimes a very big obstacle. Sometimes you're in a remote location. Sometimes you just don't have the time, but this is pushing it. And that's why The Smashing Machine could mark a turning point for Dwayne Johnson. As a producer, I have to give him props for buying the rights to Kerr's story back in 2008 when the documentary of the same name was released. Benny Safdie also admits that it was Johnson who pulled him into the film because it was Johnson who sent the documentary of Mark Kerr's life and a letter to the Safdie brothers telling them that he thinks that they could be the one to translate Kerr's story into a feature. Something about their flair for capturing anxiety, something that really haunts the story of Mark Kerr. Anyway, this is way back in 2019, a bad time in Hollywood to make any kind of long-term plans, with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic causing many delays, as well as the writer's strike. So the idea for a Mark Kerr feature kind of just fizzled out. Between 2019 and 2023, there wasn't any movement on the project at all, and Benny Safdie was off on his own exploration phase. He was training in a gym and got a taste of losing. He got really into the idea of trying mixed martial arts for himself, and that experience seems to have awakened something within him. But his side missions didn't end there. He also did a lot more acting roles, but it wasn't long before he got a call from a relatively unknown director, Christopher Nolan, for an indie project called Oppenheimer. And it's on the set of Oppenheimer that he developed a relationship with one of Johnson's best friends, Emily Blunt, his former co-star of The Jungle Cruise. And voila, a couple of calls later, and the dream of making this feature started to take shape, with a director hungry to capture the feeling of losing from his time doing some MMA exploration, and an actor yearning to take on a challenge. So there's some cool context for you about the 6 years of development this film had before it became a reality, and I won't make you wait any longer, so let's talk about the film itself, The Smashing Machine. The Smashing Machine is the story of a mixed martial arts and UFC champion, Mark Kerr. The film is written and directed by Benny Safdie, and it stars Dwayne Johnson, Emily Blunt, Ryan Bader, and Bas Rutten. Now let's start off quickly with performances, because here Johnson is fantastic. He is perfect. Again, on the surface, it may seem like it's an easy role for him to take on. He's very charismatic. He becomes Mark Kerr, and Mark Kerr is not just charismatic, but he is also very vulnerable and raw. If you go back and look at any of his interviews, he is so intense with his emotions, and he's so in tune to how he feels and communicates that very well. And Johnson is like a sponge, taking everything about Mark Kerr and applying it to himself here physically. He is transformed into him with his mannerism and the soft-spoken nature. And he gets a lot of help in that transformation from Oscar-winning makeup designer Kazuhiro, whose resume includes everything from How the Grinch Stole Christmas to The Shape of Water. But there's an inverse correlation between the amount of muscles and prosthetics that Johnson piled on and the immense vulnerability on display. There is nothing for him to hide behind. There's no big explosions, no big slapstick humor, no musical numbers. He is tasked with capturing the real-life, soft-spoken, and kind outward nature of Kerr, while not shying away from the demons fueling his addiction to opiates, his inability to imagine what it feels like to lose, and the toxicity of his relationship with his partner, Dawn. Now, Emily Blunt as Dawn is also just exquisite as the immature and mismatched romantic partner of Kerr. Both characters have their vices, and I found myself connecting with their vulnerabilities and insecurities while also being completely at odds with how they chose to handle some of those stressful situations. Seriously, I don't know where Kerr takes more damage, in the ring at work or the ring at home. This movie is like some kind of amalgamation of like a Marriage Story and Rocky. Like it's a sports story, but it's also very much a drama. I was also so surprised by the performances from Ryan Bader and Bas Rutten, two former MMA professional fighters who've had a lot of experience performing in other capacities, but they're not seasoned actors. But against Emily Blunt and Dwayne Johnson, they are fantastic. They really rose to the occasion, and I think they handled themselves so well. The story itself is very insular and contained, and I think that is so special. I think that's what set this movie apart from your other sports biopic films. We see some grandiosity in the fights being transported to Japan to witness the very early days of MMA, but it never feels bigger than what Mark Kerr is battling within himself. That emotional proximity is what drives this film. The directing choices here are quite remarkable and don't feel on paper like they would match what we're going for with this film, but the film isn't trying to be your typical sports biopic. It's really more focused on the sports psychology and what Mark Kerr has to overcome mentally to achieve his goals. And I think the choice to film this on 16mm and give it this home video feel really transports you into the ring. It feels like you are there with them. There is one uncut sequence that is not only a testament to the technical execution this film achieves, but the artful decisions made from the director, the actor, the cinematographer, and every department coming together to capture the internal strife of our protagonist, completely wordless, yet so relatable. In addition to the 16mm adding this home video quality to the movie, it also helps with the performances. Because they're shooting on 16mm, the cameras are smaller, so they're able to hide them on set, and you can kind of see how that feels like we're watching something like a fly on the wall. You feel like you are in a room where you're not supposed to be, and it feels really emotionally intense, and it feels really intimate. And the handheld aspect of it makes it feel more like a period piece, and I think that was the right way to go. And the costume department, let's just say that they might be responsible for an influx of early 2000s athletic wear searches, because I definitely had some vintage sweater envy watching this movie. I think I should call my dad and see if I could raid his closet. So you have these really intimate performances, you have this really intimate approach to the direction and the film stock they chose to shoot this on, but I also think that the soundtrack helps us get really inside of our characters' heads. It's this fantastic jazzy score by Nala Sinefro, and it keeps us in Kerr's mentality and his mental state, because he has these big highs and big lows as an addict, as an athlete. There's these different points in his life where he's experiencing complete euphoria and just complete and utter desolation. And I feel like having to go through that emotional journey, it's really anchored by this performance and these other elements that come together to help really bolster the emotional core of the film. And the score is definitely one of those things. As far as the themes go, I think that this film is really playing it close to the vest and keeping things really insular to the emotionality of our characters. Instead of it being a movie that leads up to the big game or the big match, and we're all just focused on what it takes to train to get to that point, I feel like the film is more driven to showing you how Mark Kerr is battling these inner demons. He's on the road to redemption. He's dealing with addiction. He is really struggling with self-acceptance. And so it's not just about how he's going to win this big match, how he's going to help prove to the world that MMA is a sport worth their time and attention. But it's like the sport psychology of an athlete who's performing at this high caliber with this much on the line, not only with his body, but with the mental fortitude he has to have in order to perform at that high level. And I think this movie is a very fascinating look at a very small piece of life for Mark Kerr at this time. And I appreciate that it didn't try to go too big with over-explaining MMA and the context of the time that this is all happening in. Yes, they give you a little bit of that with this cheeky conversation towards the beginning of the film with Mark Kerr and this woman waiting in the doctor's office waiting room. But other than that, we don't spend too much time trying to explain to us the importance of the context of MMA. What's important is how Mark Kerr is going to be a better version of himself. Overall, The Smashing Machine is a solid, yet by-the-book sports genre movie, but the shining silver lining is undoubtedly Johnson's performance. I don't think this movie takes any big risks with the arc of the story or the framing of it all. Yes, it's doing something a little different by staying close to the emotionality and the mental headspace of our athlete, but even in that way, I don't feel like it kind of broke too much ground, but it is still a very solid movie narratively. But I do think the big story out of this movie should be that Dwayne Johnson is just excellent. I think physically, of course, this was a great match for him. I know that he did the work to actually build a muscle that would make sense to match what Mark Kerr would have looked like back then. So it's not just about him showing up to work and already being ready to go. He did put a lot of work into the physicality of it. But I think what he does emotionally with this character and how close he plays this character to the inner turmoil that he's experiencing throughout the film is just so fascinating. And I really, really enjoyed seeing him in this capacity. I think this could be a turning point for his career. I also have to give kudos to Emily Blunt. She's a great actress every time, but I think here she's opposite a scene partner who I know they have some personal history. So there's that vulnerability coming through and really bringing out the best in Johnson. And I think them together just gave me a lot of anxiety watching this film. I think I was more scared watching them go toe to toe than I was seeing him in the ring. But I think combined, it makes for a very visceral and engaging experience, even though the narrative itself felt a little, by the books and predictable. And on the Movie Mija meter, I give The Smashing Machine 3.5 out of 5 stars. There you have it. That is my review of The Smashing Machine. If anything, this movie made me yearn for the Iron Claw to have had another chance to get the flowers I think that movie deserves. That movie starring Zac Efron. It's another fighting biography movie. It is so incredibly well acted and made, and I really was torn up watching that movie, and it makes me sad to know that it's still kind of flew under the radar for most people. So if you watch The Smashing Machine and you're yearning for something emotionally similar that also exists in the world of sports and fighting, I highly recommend The Iron Claw. Thank you so much for watching my video and staying through to the end. If you made it this far, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel so you can get one new movie review from me every single week. And if you want even more insights, movie reviews, movie news from me, you can follow me at Movie Mija on Letterboxd, Instagram, and TikTok. Okay, that is all for now. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!